Welcome to the latest episode of FoodTech Stories. I'm your host, FoodTech marketing expert Megan Thomas. FoodTech Stories features the leaders pioneering new approaches to technology, collaboration, and storytelling in the food tech and ag tech space. Food and agricultural changing, and fresh ideas and leadership are needed to sustainably feed the growing global population. Join us every other week as we talk to a founder, operator, or visionary in food and agriculture. My guest is Anthony Almada, and Anthony is the co-founder and former president of EAS and is currently president of Abbott Nutrition, Inc. Welcome, Anthony, to FoodTech Stories.
Megan, my pleasure and privilege.
What led you to co-found EAS, which I believe is considered to be one of the early pioneers in the field of performance nutrition?
There's a transitional point that any scientist that enters into industry, irrespective of the industry, cosmetics, surgery, medicine, nutritional products, and I had lots of academic training. I'd already graduated from Berkeley in grad school. I had a professor that is preeminent in the area of muscle metabolism and lactic acid metabolism, which is horribly misunderstood still to this day. After doing my graduate work at Berkeley with animals or rodents, I had the privilege of moving up the food chain to human studies. This is circa 1989. I was doing research at UC San Francisco Medical Center, VA, overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge and the ocean. And we had what I call the biochemical equivalent of an MRI. It's an MRS, magnetic resonance spectroscopy, not imaging for the eye. In that, these are very large magnets, not unlike an MRI, and you put in a limb like a leg, and you put something atop the front of the leg or the shin. There's a muscle group there. Then you press against an immovable force, and you can measure the change of muscle energy metabolites over time while the person is fatiguing. And that gave me the first applied and non-invasive understanding of phosphocreatine, because one of the things that's measured in the magnet when you're doing exercise is a certain form that's under intense magnetic field measurable called phosphorus. And so anything with phosphorus, the P and ATP, phosphocreatine, you see the changes. Seeing that live in real time without puncturing the skin and no blood was fascinating. Fast forward to 92 in September, I was spending 15 to 20 hours a week at the medical lab at UCSF going through the journals by hand as they would come out, always looking for something new, all pre-internet. And I came across one of my favorite journals, and on the back of it was a study talking about creatine orally. And like, oh my, I opened up. So the second author was the author or the scientist who invented carbohydrate loading in the 60s, instantly recognized. I go, oh my. And they show that you fed creatine orally, it got into muscle and increased muscle creatine and phosphocreatine. Lights went off. I called a friend of mine who we were working with before, still in ingredients back in 89. We survived the San Francisco earthquake. And I said, Ed, this is very intriguing. So we offered it as an ingredient to Twin Lab and Weider in late 92, before anyone heard about creatine, at least from our understanding. Both companies rejected it. No, not interested. So I said, Ed, if we don't do this, somebody else will. So we created a brand, gave it the name EAS, Experimental Applied Sciences, and birthed it and started going right to pro athletes. We did 2 clinical trials in the first year, but that clinical research experience is what lit up the interest and the enthusiasm. But perhaps what was most distinctive is that Ed and I, Ed Bird, BYRD, had done a lot of work in ingredient sourcing. We knew where to go, and I found a supplier in the US who was making creatine monohydrate. They were selling it for medical purposes. We were able to get it at a fraction of the cost of the first brand that introduced in the world in the UK that Steve Jennings led, Ergomax C100. That was the brand name. His product was much more expensive, so he did not recommend, or was he able to recommend, the evidence-based dose. He recommended only a few to several grams a day. We were recommending 20 grams a day. People could afford ours. They couldn't afford his.
So many interesting things to delve deeper into there. When I get the chance to meet listeners of the podcast, they often mention the quality of the production as one of their favorite parts of the show. That praise is due to the team that edits the show, TJG Media. Their team works with the raw audio files of each interview to enhance the quality of the sound, minimize external noise, and cut out the natural pauses that occur in conversation to create each fast-paced episode. Plus, they create engaging short-form videos to promote each episode on social media. Visit tjgmediallc.com to find out more. We hear a lot today about differentiated ingredients and really game changing new products. And I think your product actually was that, but they're so very rare. I love how understanding too, not just the origin story, but kind of how you came about the product and how you balance science and unit economics, which we talk a lot about here as well. I have always heard it referred to as creatine, but you say creatine. Is that something that everyone else has just been getting wrong all these years?
I don't know. You have to go back a couple hundred years to find out how to correctly pronounce it, but it may be just a continental shift.
Fair enough, fair enough. When you were working in the late 80s, early 90s, what did performance nutrition look like? Was that a field? And if so, what did it look like?
The two brand titans were Weider and TwinLab, where they were winning. And what was probably most experiential before the dawn of the stimulant world were weight gainers. It became a war of who could create the biggest serving size or the biggest serving or biggest finished unit. There was a time where Weider had one that was the size of a small dog food bag. It was maybe half a meter tall and about as wide as a 10-pound dog food bag. And we used to kid that the serving size was a beach toy shovel. I mean, you had to take several scoops of this to get 1,000 calories. And what people were overlooking, and they had to become aware when you asked them, oh, yes, of course I want that, is weight is different than fat-free mass. So if you gain weight, typically when you overeat, half of the weight you gain by doing nothing is fat mass. And that inspired us to take our product had creatine and other ingredients added to it, including protein. We called it phosphagain. We had the first generation. We compared it head to head against TwinLab's leading weight gainer product called Gainer's Fuel 1000. We did it at University of Memphis with a Kreider, and we showed head to head. Indeed, they gained weight on the Gainer's Fuel. Half it was fat. We did DEXA for body comp. We showed that we had a gain in fat-free mass or muscle and performance compared to that product. And we created this category of lean mass, low-calorie lean mass stimulator, which was counterintuitive. How could you gain weight with no calories without it being a drug or without it being fat?
What was the reaction from the marketplace when you launched that category?
Because of the dramatic, I think creatine was probably the first ingredient or product that produced an experiential response within as short as a week. People saw a dramatic change, not only in their performance, but also just by stepping on the scale or how they felt, their muscles felt more full. And that reinforcement was magical. Had it not been perceptible, had it taken a month, I don't think you and I would be talking right now, but it's quite dramatic.
Wow. And then did it grow by word of mouth or by other means?
A year and a half after we started EAS, although we had talked to him within 2 months of starting the company, Bill Phillips was leading as a partner in a company called Metrics with two other partners, and Jeff Everson and Scott Connolly, MD. Bill and Connolly started having differing opinions. We were able to entice Bill to leave Metrics and join us a year and a half after we started, and we reflexively and with no hesitation gave him equal equity as Ed and I had. And I said this in a documentary. It was the smartest business move we ever made. Bill's infrastructure, his distribution system, his magazine, which effectively was a catalog for Metrics, then it became an EAS catalog. And this is all again pre-internet, was fax, became a very potent selling tool. And they had a call center, so they would call stores, they would call gyms, they would call customers. One that was so wonderful to have that direct interface, which is so rare now. But that personal touch and having that intimate connection with a retailer or a person was instrumental.
So you also built significant distribution kind of from the bottom up, which I'm sure helped build the business as well. At that time, how did you think about that high performance athlete, the bodybuilder, as we may have called it at one time, versus the weekend warrior or that everyday consumer?
One of the things that Bill did in his magazine, Muscle Media 2000, is that he did not do coverage of the drug sport of bodybuilding, which it is. Even in the so-called natural world, drugs are rampant, perhaps more than any other sport, if you want to call it a sport or kind of competition. He would feature no-name persons. He would feature amateurs. He would feature people that, oh gosh, that's my cousin. In the magazine, on the cover, he would show people, but typically these are people that were famous through his magazine, but they were not famous by being on stage. And that physique enthusiast or physique athlete were the core of EAS. And the first trade show that we went to with EAS, Ed and I went to Interbike, which is a bicycle industry show And the only products that were offered there were power bars, multivitamins, and something called Accelerate, which is a carbohydrate protein mixture. Endurance enthusiasts could not grasp creatine. We realized the only place to really anchor this brand and its positioning and the evidence is within the strength and physique world and the high intensity sports. So hockey. We did a study with Mel Williams at Old Dominion with baseball players sprinting on the bases. We published that with a non-positive outcome. I said we have to publish all the results. That landscape then, it was not accustomed to anything that really worked in an experiential way except drugs, just because of the indoctrination of more protein is better. Creatine also had that wonderful gift of creating a whole new element of perception or experiential based products. So people began looking for that.
How do you think that your background as a scientist and that the approach you take, kind of that scientific inquiry approach, enabled you to be successful? What role did it play?
It was a holy trinity trifecta. I had long had one foot in the industry since I was 14 and an interest in academia. When I was in my teens and started working in a health food store, I wanted to be a doctor. I always had this enchantment with evidence, even though I didn't know it was called evidence then. And taking that through the different companies I worked for Metagenics, for Gerald Farners as a consultant, et cetera. And they would always try to integrate science, but they were not doing studies on their actual products. Product or composition specific evidence was incredibly rare unless it was a single ingredient. Part of the inspiration behind the name experimental applied science is experimentation, then apply it through implied clinical trials in humans at academic centers where their most rigorous experts reside, not a for-profit research center where they just do whatever they want, or whatever they're asked to, presenting and publishing it. Birthing from the mountain of evidence in science, to me, gave us a significant competitive edge because at the time, no one built a company around that, especially in sports nutrition, except Gatorade.
That's right. Yeah.
Gatorade was birthed in the lab of a nephrologist who had an amazing royalty deal. With that thrust and with this branding and how Bill Phillips, our then later partner, embraced the utility and the exploitability of evidence from a university in marketing, it was the first in dietary supplements. That became the badge, and all these researchers would come to us because, wow, you guys are doing it right. Can we get some of your product? And we'll do studies on your ingredient for free, which led to a whole bunch of other studies for free.
Amazing.
It's a sell ball.
But baking the actual scientific research into your go-to-market strategy, very wise.
It's also the highest level of marketing messaging. You can't go above university level evidence. The next step down would be private research center evidence, but it's not being done by experts. Here, when you have a university badge and you present it at a national conference and you publish it in a respectable journal, it's effectively Mount Everest pinnacle level. Everything else is inferior.
It changes that perception. It's an excellent point of those key stakeholders. You pass over that litmus test in being credible.
Instant credibility, consumer confidence, indeed.
Laddering to confidence and providing another really meaningful reason to believe for the product. So, what is today's consumer looking for from performance nutrition products?
Performance has gone beyond that muscular or musculoskeletal. I think it's gone into the realm of cognitive or mental. Some could say sleep performance. And performance has now become automobile, which has different hybrid, electric, compact, exotic, sports, etc. It could be whatever one wants. With creatine, distinctively, it's transmuted into something that now is being advocated for people with Alzheimer's, based upon a recent placebo uncontrolled study. Women, which is counterintuitive, even though studies we did a study in teenage girls over 20 years ago, and the data were there showing that it works, but it just took so much time for women influencers online who aren't experts, but they're still influencers, who influence toward their physique by their appearance. You should take this. I'd take it too. And I don't look jacked up and muscular and like I'm on steroids, even though I may be on them. To have women embrace them, women that aren't looking that way, but well, I can take that and I won't gain and look bulky. Cognitive effects studies keep on coming in. It's really hard to understand how it creates and work in the brain energetically. It's a different discussion. Aging, of course, even going back to the early stage, and someday it will be in an infant formula, I suspect. Pregnancy and lactation, all these different areas that can apply. Bone health, bone protection in this performance consumer. The highest level will be still looking for something that makes them stronger, bigger, faster. Bigger is not performance. And so there's this physique nutrition element still exists where even losing fat is a performance nutrition outcome, even though performance is not directly related to that. And I think it's so multifaceted, but now you have a lot more people that aren't as concerned with their physique appearance as how well they function and how they feel after they train or whatever they do, how they sleep, and how they feel when they look in the mirror. The aesthetics still are retained, that aesthetic interest.
That's right, but a more holistic approach, definition to what performance means.
Inside and out, things you can't see and things that you can see and feel.
Yeah. Why do you think that change took place?
I think there are a couple drivers. One of them is whole orientation towards functional training like CrossFit, where lifting weights was mocked. What's the functionality in that? Rather than lifting something up as if you're lifting up a grocery bag. All types of training that are vigorous have a profound effect upon one's lifestyle and quality of life. No one ever said, damn it, why did I work out today? There's always a benefit or a gift that comes from working out, the neurobehavioral psychological benefits. And then there's the continued evolution and appearance of more and more celebrities, artists, musicians who have a physique some would say is more desirable, that inspires, that compels. In the movie and cinema and TV world, there's still this admiration of physiques that are very big and muscular, and even now more in for the women's physiques. More often than not, there are performance enhancing or physique enhancing drugs involved. Almost no one ever mentions that. But irrespective of that, there's a training component. There's usually a personal trainer, a diet, and supplementation. And sometimes the supplement comes out. And so those are inextricably linked. And that whole package is typically practiced. And everyone that I know, even with a person who has a physique, man or woman, that you would not think they work out, but they're fit, they're maybe an endurance athlete. In their cupboards, they have at least 2 or 3 supplements, including a fish oil, a protein, and often a creatine, and a multivitamin, maybe a probiotic. It's just a package that comes along with it.
It's just evolved over time what's in that package.
It's much more popular now. It's almost cool to tell people what you take or to ask people at a cocktail party, not are you on gluten-free, but what supplements are you taking these days?
People think about these things a lot more and they make their own personal assessments of how this is what I'm doing. Here's why it's working for me. Here's what I need. There are those experts out there too, but that self-directed aspect, I think, is a really interesting development.
Very, very few people, even with a PhD or an MD after the name, really know what they're talking about. And almost all of them are reporters. The reporters are those that have read other people's research, but because they have initials after their name, all of the studies that went behind a certain subject matter or ingredient or drug or treatment, they often are miscue and misinformed, sometimes disinformed, and conflicts of interest are so rampant, and often not reported. It's really difficult. Where is the truth and what is the totality of evidence so I can make a truly informed decision?
We did an episode on misinformation and disinformation and how that is impacting and distorting what people understand about rigorous, credible information. Yeah, fascinating topic and one that's obviously important to continue to address.
I'll have to listen to that episode.
Yeah, it was really fascinating, especially the disinformation side where it's monetized, the deliberate spread of incorrect information is monetized. Really interesting. So, what is the nature of your work today, Anthony?
On topic, I'm working on the creatine water, a new creatine, which I can't tell you more, that will be very different, not chemically, but just in terms of what other aspects. And one of the interesting and fun things about creatine and seeing it evolve over now since 92 is that many have tried to create these other better than creatine monohydrate forms. None of them have put them to the test in a systematic and robust way. And there's still this perception that creatine monohydrate is poorly absorbed. The data are so compelling that it's maybe 95% absorbed. A microbial sciences company called Seed, been with them since 2018, November. Month 5, I'm working with a mushroom company, working on a dog supplement that contains creatine, so it's a meal topper, along with other evidence-based in dogs ingredients, not just human reverse going to canines.
50 years, congrats. Quite an accomplishment. That's a great segue into what is the number one lesson you have taken away from your long lasting career in the field?
One is seek out partners that know more than you in complementary areas. We did that with Bill Phillips. 2, go after the white space or the blue sky where others aren't. 3, part of 1 is know that you can't do it yourself. Humility and complementary and non-redundancy, and just that, I don't like a romantic partner. Date for a while before you choose to get engaged or married or betrothed, whatever, aligned. The last one is to understand intellectual property, because the speed at which one can create a new product is about a month, and the expertise needed is virtually nil. You just need a person to make it for you. And if you can create a product or products that can't be duplicated, even chemically, but to be able to introduce something that others can't make, and if the label looks the same, but it's chemically different, you have a legal tool that's better than patent infringement, which is very expensive. Most people don't know how much expense, the time, and how it eviscerates the leadership of the company. It's greatly overvalued having a patent versus having something that can't be duplicated. And then if you can marry that with evidence in humans on the actual product, and those claims or the outcomes of that study marry with how you position it, you have a potential blockbuster if it benefits many people.
Those are fantastic takeaways. I love that you had 4 of them. Thank you. I really enjoyed our conversation today, Anthony.
I did too. My pleasure.
I wish you continued success on your journey.
Thanks so much, Megan. And you got the word ladder up into your discussion once, laddering up. I was waiting for you to insert it, and you did. Well done.
Well, thank you for noticing. Take care. Thanks for joining us today on the latest episode of FoodTech Stories. Be sure and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and keep an eye out for our bi-weekly episodes. I'm your host, Megan Thomas, founder of Ladder 17. FoodTech Stories is edited by TJG Media.